In a tastefully decorated suburban home, a 45-year-old woman was about to teach her ungrateful family a lesson they'd never forget. What started as a birthday celebration turned into public humiliation when they handed her the bill for her own dinner. Rebecca Winters wasn't your typical middle-aged mother of three. For 2 decades, she had financially supported her adult children through countless emergencies and temporary situations. When she was presented with that restaurant check, her hands trembling slightly, they had no idea they were setting in motion their own undoing. What began as a birthday insult would end with Rebecca helping them pack their bags, permanently. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Rebecca's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the leather folder containing the dinner check. The waiter had deliberately placed it in the center of the table, but somehow it had migrated to her place setting. She glanced around at her 3 adult children, all suddenly preoccupied with their phones or the restaurant's decor. The birthday candle on her half-eaten slice of chocolate cake had long since been extinguished, along with any expectation that this evening would be different from the pattern of the past several years. Is there some confusion? Rebecca asked, her voice carrying just the right note of uncertainty. I thought since you all invited me out for my birthday. Aiden, her oldest at 27, finally looked up from his phone with that particular mix of impatience and entitlement she'd grown to recognize over the past decade. Mom, come on. You know things are tight for all of us right now. The economy's a mess, and my student loans aren't going to pay themselves. Rebecca let her eyes drift around the upscale restaurant with calculated bewilderment, taking in the carefully selected venue her children had chosen, premium steaks, craft cocktails, and a wine list that started at $50 a bottle. The kind of place that signaled special occasion but apparently not special enough for them to actually treat her. I don't understand, Rebecca said, her voice deliberately soft and wounded. It's Tuesday, right? My birthday is on Tuesday this year. Jessica, her middle child at 25, shifted uncomfortably in her designer dress that Rebecca knew cost at least 2 weeks of her own grocery budget. Jessica's eyes swept over the table with practiced nonchalance, the way they always did when money was about to be discussed, her jaw tightening slightly as she spotted the total at the bottom of the check. It's Thursday, Mom, Jessica said with exaggerated patience. Your birthday was Tuesday, but this was the only night we could all get together, remember? Tyler had that thing on Tuesday, and I had my networking event. Thursday, Rebecca thought. With crystal clarity. May 15th, 7:43 p.m, exactly as she'd planned. Attorney Michelle Palmer should be finalizing the paperwork right about now. Right, of course, Rebecca nodded, blinking rapidly as if trying to process this information. Thursday. I must have gotten confused again. So many things to keep track of these days. Tyler, her youngest at 23, barely looked up from his third cocktail of the evening. It's fine, Mom. We're here now, celebrating. That's what matters, right? His smile never quite reached his eyes as he raised his glass in a half-hearted toast before draining it. Rebecca's performance flickered for just a moment, a flash of steel in her eyes as she thought of Tyler's most recent emergency, a down payment for a luxury apartment he couldn't possibly afford but insisted was essential for his personal brand as an aspiring social media influencer. Then she caught herself, letting confusion cloud her expression again. Yes, you're all here, she murmured. It's just that I thought. Wasn't there something about this being your treat? Or did I imagine that part? She furrowed her brow, creating the perfect image of someone trying to recall details that might not have existed. Aiden sighed heavily, the sound of someone dealing with an unreasonable request. Mom, I specifically texted dinner Thursday? I never said anything about treating you. Rebecca carefully removed the bank card from her wallet, the same wallet that had been opened countless times over the years for, just until payday, loans and, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, investments that somehow never yielded returns. Of course, she said quietly. My mistake. Jessica, trained in corporate communications and always the diplomat, leaned forward with a rehearsed smile. Mom, we got you presents, remember? She gestured to the small pile of hastily wrapped packages beside Rebecca's seat. And we're all spending time together. That's what you always say matters most. Rebecca nodded, swiping her card without comment. Through the restaurant window, she could see new construction across the street, upscale condominiums rising where a family-owned hardware store had stood for generations. The changing neighborhood reflected her own transformation, something none of her children had bothered to notice. You're right, Rebecca said, signing the receipt with an extra 20% tip. The waiter, at least, had treated her with respect. Family time is precious. Jessica visibly relaxed, crisis averted. So tell us what you've been up to lately. Still doing that little online business thing? That little online business thing had grown into a 7-figure e-commerce operation over the past 3 years, but Rebecca simply nodded with appropriate modesty. It's coming along. Keeping me busy. You should hire someone to help you, Tyler offered, suddenly interested now that money was mentioned. I know this guy who's amazing with social media marketing. He could really take your little shop to the next level. Rebecca let her expression brighten with maternal appreciation. That's thoughtful, honey. Maybe someday when things are more established. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Aiden, already scrolling through his phone again, glanced up briefly. Speaking of established, Mom, I've been meaning to talk to you about the house. Rebecca's heart rate quickened slightly, but she kept her expression neutral. The house? What about it? Jessica, Tyler, and I have been talking, Aiden said, setting his phone down with the decisive movement of someone accustomed to taking charge of situations. We think it might be time for you to consider downsizing. That 4-bedroom is way too much for just one person. But I've lived there for 22 years, Rebecca said, letting genuine emotion color her voice. Since before your father left. All your childhood memories are there. Exactly, Jessica jumped in, clearly having rehearsed this conversation. It's full of the past, Mom. You should be looking toward the future. A nice condo would be so much less maintenance for you. And the market is hot right now, Tyler added, his eyes lighting up with the same gleam they got whenever he spotted an opportunity. You could make a killing. Rebecca thought of the spacious home she'd fought to keep in the divorce, the mortgage she'd paid off through years of careful budgeting and overtime work while raising 3 children alone. The same home that had somehow become an informal storage facility for her adult children's possessions and occasionally a rent-free landing pad between their apartments. I don't know, she said hesitantly. Where would I put all your things? Aiden's exercise equipment in the garage, Jessica's seasonal wardrobes in the guest room closets, Tyler's gaming setup in the basement. We could help you sort through everything, Jessica offered magnanimously. Decide what to keep and what to let go of. It would be very freeing for you, Mom. Freeing, Rebecca thought. An interesting choice of words for what amounted to pushing her out of her own home to free up an asset they clearly saw as their future inheritance. I suppose I could think about it, she said, her voice small and uncertain. Though the idea of moving at my age seems overwhelming. You're only 45, Mom, Aiden said with a touch of impatience. Hardly ready for the retirement home. Besides, we'd help you. I know some great real estate agents who specialize in helping people your age transition to more appropriate housing. People your age. As if 45 was ancient. As if she hadn't run a half marathon just last month or launched a new product line or been featured in Entrepreneur magazine as a midlife success story. That's very thoughtful, Rebecca said, signing the receipt with a slight tremble in her hand. I'll definitely give it some consideration. Presents were opened next, a scented candle from Jessica, the same brand Rebecca had given her for Christmas, a gift card to a chain restaurant from Tyler, with $17.50 remaining on it, she would later discover, and a self-help book from Aiden, titled Reinventing Yourself After 40, that she strongly suspected was a re-gift from his ex-girlfriend. Throughout it all, Rebecca maintained her performance of maternal gratitude, exclaiming over each item as if it represented deep thought rather than last-minute obligation. Her children, satisfied that their filial duties had been discharged for another year, grew increasingly eager to end the evening. I should get going, Jessica announced, checking her watch. Early meeting tomorrow with the VPs. Yeah, I'm meeting some friends downtown, Tyler added, already texting rapidly. I'll walk you to your car, Mom, Aiden offered, his tone suggesting this was a major concession to her advanced age and fragility. As they exited the restaurant, Rebecca noticed how none of her children had thought to take the leftover cake, despite the waiter's careful packaging. Another $15 wasted, but at least she'd have something sweet for breakfast. In the parking lot, Aiden performed his expected role of concerned son, watching as Rebecca located her keys in her purse with deliberate slowness. Are you sure you're okay to drive? He asked, his eyes already drifting toward the group of friends Tyler was meeting at the bar next door. You seem a little off tonight. Just tired, Rebecca assured him with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It's been a long week at work. You really should consider cutting back your hours, Aiden advised with the confidence of someone who had never worked more than 40 hours in a week. At your age, stress can really take a toll. Rebecca nodded agreeably. You're probably right. I'll talk to my boss about it. She had no boss, of course. Hadn't had one for 3 years. But Aiden had never bothered to ask about the specifics of her business, assuming it was some quaint little hobby that kept his mother occupied between taking care of his needs. Hugs were exchanged, quick and perfunctory, before her children scattered to their respective evenings. Rebecca stood beside her modest sedan, watching as Aiden jogged over to join Tyler and his friends, while Jessica climbed into her least luxury SUV that Rebecca knew she could barely afford. Only when they were completely out of sight did Rebecca's posture change. The slight stoop disappeared from her shoulders. The uncertain expression vanished from her face. She slid into her car with the fluid confidence of someone half her age and pulled out her phone. "Michelle? It's Rebecca. Are we all set for tomorrow?" The voice on the other end was crisp and professional. "Everything's ready. The papers just need your signature. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Rebecca watched Jessica's SUV pull out of the parking lot, music blaring, without so much as a backward glance. "More certain than I've ever been," she replied. "It's time they learned what independence really means." The call ended with a decisive click, and Rebecca started her car, her hands no longer trembling at all. As she drove away from the restaurant, her mind was already mapping out the details of what would happen in the coming days. The dinner check had been insulting, yes, but it was merely the final confirmation that she needed to implement the plan she'd been developing for months. 20 minutes later, Rebecca pulled into the driveway of her beautiful colonial home, the one her children were so eager for her to downsize from. The front porch light welcomed her, illuminating the carefully tended garden that had become her weekend passion. Inside, the house was immaculate and tastefully decorated, nothing like the cluttered, disorganized space her children seemed to imagine she lived in. She kicked off her heels and moved through the quiet rooms with purpose, stopping in her home office. The space was sleek and professional, dominated by a large desk with 3 computer monitors, the command center of her thriving e-commerce business. On the walls hung framed articles about her company's success and photographs of Rebecca at industry conferences, looking confident and accomplished. Rebecca settled into her ergonomic chair and opened her laptop, reviewing the documents Michelle had emailed over. Everything was in order, just as they had discussed. The lease termination notices, the storage unit contracts, the formal letters revoking financial support, and most importantly, the papers establishing her new living trust, with very specific conditions for her children's future inheritance. For too long, Rebecca had allowed her adult children to treat her as nothing more than a convenience, an ATM, a storage facility, a safety net that would always be there no matter how they behaved. Tomorrow, that would change. She printed the documents, signed where indicated, and organized everything into 3 separate folders labeled with her children's names. Then she opened her financial management software and reviewed her accounts one last time. The numbers confirmed what she already knew. Over the past 5 years alone, she had loaned her children more than $175,000, virtually none of which had been repaid. Add to that the cost of housing them intermittently, storing their possessions, and covering their various emergencies, and the total approached $250,000. Money that could have funded her retirement years earlier. Money that had instead enabled their continued dependence and entitlement. Rebecca closed the laptop and moved to her bedroom, changing into comfortable pajamas before standing at the window that overlooked her backyard. In the moonlight, she could see the outline of the children's old treehouse, now sagging slightly with age. She remembered building it with them one summer, back when they still valued what she could teach them rather than just what she could give them. When had things changed? When had her role as mother transformed from nurturer to enabler? When had her children started seeing her as a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be respected? Perhaps it had started with small things, covering a missed cell phone payment here, buying an expensive prom dress there. Or perhaps it had begun in the aftermath of the divorce, when her desire to compensate for their father's absence had clouded her judgment about appropriate boundaries. Regardless of how it started, tomorrow it would end. Rebecca slept soundly that night, untroubled by doubts. When morning came, she rose early, dressed in one of her most professional outfits, and prepared for the day ahead. At exactly 9 a.m., she sent identical text messages to all 3 children. Need to discuss something important. Please come to the house at 6 p.m. tonight. No excuses. The responses came quickly and predictably. Aiden, can't we just talk on the phone? Got plans tonight. Jessica, is everything okay? Might be late, have a meeting. Tyler, what's up? Can I come tomorrow instead? Rebecca replied to each with the same firm message, 6 p.m. It's important. I need all of you here. By 5:45 that evening, Rebecca had arranged everything in the living room. The folders sat on the coffee table, alongside a plate of cookies she'd baked that morning and a pot of coffee. On the mantel, stood a framed copy of the most recent property appraisal for her home, showing a value nearly double what her children likely estimated. Jessica arrived first, still in her work clothes, curiosity warring with annoyance on her face. "Mom? What's going on?" Your text sounded serious. "Let's wait for your brothers," Rebecca replied calmly, gesturing for Jessica to take a seat. Aiden arrived 7 minutes late, already radiating impatience. "This needs to be quick, Mom. I'm meeting some friends for basketball at 7:30. Tyler strolled in at 6:22, offering no explanation or apology for his tardiness. Once all three were seated, Rebecca remained standing, surveying her adult children with new clarity. They looked back at her with expressions ranging from mild concern to undisguised impatience, none of them really seeing her at all. "Thank you for coming," Rebecca began, her voice strong and steady, nothing like the hesitant tone she'd used at dinner the night before. "I've made some decisions that will affect all of you, and I wanted to tell you in person." Her unexpected directness caught their attention. Even Tyler put down his phone. "First," Rebecca continued, "I want to thank you for dinner last night. It was illuminating." Jessica shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, if this is about the check, this isn't just about the check," Rebecca interrupted smoothly. "Though that is part of it. This is about patterns and expectations that have developed over many years. Patterns that aren't healthy for any of us." She picked up the folders from the coffee table and handed one to each of her children. "What's this?" Aiden asked, opening his folder with a frown. "Those are formal notices," Rebecca explained. "Aiden, yours informs you that as of June 1st, you'll need to remove your exercise equipment from my garage and find another place to store it. Jessica, your notice states that you have until the same date to collect your belongings from my guest room closets. And Tyler, yours explains that your gaming setup needs to be removed from my basement by June 1st as well." The siblings exchanged confused glances. "Also included," Rebecca continued, her voice remaining calm and measured, "are statements detailing the loans each of you has received from me over the past 5 years, with a payment plan for how you'll be repaying those amounts, beginning next month." "Repaying?" Tyler sputtered. "Mom, those were gifts." "No, they were not," Rebecca corrected firmly. "Each time, you specifically asked to borrow money until your next paycheck or until your channel started monetizing or until you got your bonus. I've kept careful records of each transaction, including text messages where repayment was promised." Aiden's face had flushed dark red. "This is ridiculous. We can't possibly pay back those amounts on our salaries. I managed to raise all 3 of you on less than what any of you currently make individually," Rebecca pointed out. "But I'm not unreasonable. The payment plans extend over 5 years, interest-free. I think that's more than fair." Jessica, always the strategist, was scanning her documents with growing alarm. "Mom, there's also something here about the house. You're not seriously thinking of selling, are you?" "Not selling," Rebecca clarified. "Renovating. I'm converting the basement into a separate apartment that I'll rent out. The garage is being transformed into my new office space for my business. And one of the upstairs bedrooms is becoming a proper guest room, for actual guests, not storage." "Your business?" Tyler repeated, sounding genuinely confused. "You mean your little online shop?" Rebecca smiled thinly. "My little online shop generated just over $1.2 million in revenue last year. I've been deliberately keeping that information from all of you because, frankly, I didn't trust how you might react." A stunned silence fell over the room. Rebecca watched as her children processed this information, their expressions cycling through disbelief, confusion, and the dawning realization that they had severely underestimated their mother. "There's one more document in your folders," Rebecca continued after a moment. "It outlines the conditions of my new living trust. As you'll see, I've arranged things so that any future inheritance is contingent upon demonstrated financial independence and responsibility. In short, how you handle yourselves from this point forward will directly impact what you receive after I'm gone." "Mom," Jessica finally managed, her voice small, "why are you doing this?" "Because I love you," Rebecca replied simply. "And because real love doesn't enable dependence or encourage entitlement. Real love sometimes means saying no and setting boundaries." She moved to the mantel and picked up the framed property appraisal, passing it around for her children to see. "Last night at dinner, you all seemed very interested in my downsizing. Curious, since this house has been appraised at $675,000, significantly more than I think any of you realized. But you're right about one thing, it is time for some changes. Around here." Aiden, recovering from his initial shock, leaned forward with narrowed eyes. "So this is punishment for suggesting you sell the house? For making you pay for dinner?" "This isn't punishment, Aiden," Rebecca corrected. "This is a reset. A chance for all of us to establish healthier patterns." I've spent years enabling behaviors that aren't serving any of you well. That stops now. Tyler stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This is insane. You can't just change everything overnight. I'm not, Rebecca said calmly. I've given you all until June 1st. That's 6 weeks to make arrangements. I'm also providing resources to help with the transition. If you turn to the last page of your folders, you'll find I've arranged and paid for a moving truck for each of you to transport your stored belongings to whatever new arrangements you make. A moving truck? Jessica repeated incredulously. Mom, we don't need to move. We don't live here. No, Rebecca agreed. You don't live here. You haven't for years. Yet somehow, large portions of my home have become dedicated storage units for your possessions. That arrangement is ending. She gestured to the cookies and coffee, untouched on the table. I'm happy to discuss any questions you have about the documents. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because I believe in your ability to stand on your own feet. I believe you're capable of more than you've been demonstrating. The conversation that followed was heated and emotional. Accusations flew. Old grievances were aired. At one point, Tyler stormed out only to return 20 minutes later, having apparently realized he had nowhere else to go that wouldn't cost him money. Throughout it all, Rebecca maintained her composure, answering questions with clarity and refusing to be drawn into circular arguments or emotional manipulation. She had anticipated their reactions, the initial shock, the anger, the attempts to make her feel guilty, the promises to change without specific plans, the threats that she would regret pushing them away. By 9:30 p.m., exhaustion had replaced anger. Her children sat in various states of deflation around the living room, the reality of their new situation finally sinking in. I know this feels harsh, Rebecca said gently. But I want you to understand something important. This isn't me abandoning you. This is me believing in you. In your capability. In your potential to build lives that don't depend on my constant bailouts. What if we can't do it? Jessica asked quietly, voicing the fear that Rebecca suspected underlay much of their resistance. You can, Rebecca assured her. All of you can. You're smart, educated adults with advantages many people never have. You just haven't needed to try because I've made it too easy not to. She stood up, signaling that the discussion was drawing to a close. I'll always be your mother. I'll always love you. But from now on, that love will take a different form. Less financial support, more emotional encouragement. Less enabling, more actual help when you're making positive choices. As her children gathered their folders and prepared to leave, Rebecca felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. This wasn't how she had imagined her relationship with her adult children would evolve, but it was necessary, not just for her future, but for theirs. Aiden paused at the door, turning back with an expression Rebecca couldn't quite read. The moving truck, he said slowly. You already arranged and paid for it. Before dinner last night. You planned all of this in advance. Rebecca met his gaze steadily. Yes, I did. So last night, at the restaurant, when you seemed confused and hurt about the check, that was an act? Was your concern about me needing to downsize for my own good genuine? Rebecca countered. Or was it about what would benefit you? Aiden had no response to that. He left without another word, the door closing firmly behind him. Alone in her living room, Rebecca exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of decades of enabling finally begin to lift from her shoulders. She moved to her desk and opened her laptop, checking her email to find confirmation from Michelle that all the legal documents had been properly filed. It was done. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Her children might resist, might test her resolve, might attempt to find loopholes in her new boundaries. But for the first time in years, Rebecca felt truly in control of her own life and resources. More importantly, she had taken the first step toward helping her children find their own strength and independence, even if they couldn't see it that way yet. She opened her calendar and smiled at what she saw planned for the weekend, a consultation with a contractor about the basement apartment conversion. The future suddenly felt full of possibilities that had nothing to do with managing her children's ongoing crises. Rebecca Thompson had paid for her own birthday dinner, yes. But the real gift she had given herself was freedom, freedom from endless financial demands, freedom from being taken for granted, and most importantly, freedom to rebuild relationships with her children that were based on mutual respect rather than dependency. And if that meant paying for moving trucks to haul away the physical manifestations of that dependency, it was money well spent. Rebecca woke early the morning after her confrontation with her children, her mind clear despite the emotional turmoil of the previous evening. Sunlight streamed through her bedroom curtains, illuminating the space she had reclaimed as truly her own after years of prioritizing everyone else's needs. She reached for her phone, half expecting a barrage of angry texts or missed calls. Instead, There was only silence, a silence that spoke volumes about her children's shock at discovering their mother wasn't who they thought she was. She moved through her morning routine with deliberate purpose, savoring the quiet as she prepared coffee and reviewed her business emails. The first quarter sales figures had exceeded projections, and her product development team was excited about the upcoming summer collection. This was her real life, successful, organized, and fulfilling, so different from the confused, struggling mother her children had invented in their minds. At precisely 9:17 a.m., her phone chimed with the first text of the day. Jessica, always. The earliest riser of her children, Mom, we need to talk about last night. This is completely unreasonable. Rebecca waited a full 30 minutes before responding, finishing her financial review and a video call with her operations manager before typing, I'm available for reasonable discussion. What specific part of the arrangements do you find unfair? Jessica's response came instantly, all of it. The loans, the storage, the inheritance conditions. You've never mentioned any problems before. Rebecca smiled slightly as she replied, I've mentioned boundaries many times over the years. You and your brothers chose not to take those conversations. Seriously. Now we're having a different kind of conversation. She set her phone aside and continued with her workday, knowing that her daughter would need time to process this new reality. This wasn't about punishment, it was about finally being honest after years of enabling behavior disguised as maternal support. By noon, Aiden had joined the text offensive. This is legally questionable at best, Mom. You can't retroactively decide personal gifts were loans. Rebecca had anticipated this argument. She responded with calm precision, check your bank transfers from the past 5 years. The memo line on each one reads, loan, with the specific purpose noted. I also have text messages where you explicitly asked to borrow money and promised repayment. Michelle would be happy to walk you through the documentation. Aiden didn't respond. Rebecca knew he was likely checking his bank records and finding exactly what she described. Her meticulous nature, which her children had often mocked as mom being fussy, had served her well in business and would now protect her legally. At 2:30 p.m., as Rebecca was reviewing product samples in her home office, her doorbell rang. Tyler stood on her porch, his expression a mixture of defiance and calculation. Unlike his siblings, Tyler had always preferred confrontation to negotiation. We need to talk, he announced as Rebecca opened the door. I'm in the middle of my workday, she replied evenly. I can give you 15 minutes. Tyler's eyes widened slightly at this uncharacteristic boundary, but he followed her into the kitchen where she gestured to a chair before resuming her seat, positioning her laptop so she could still see incoming emails. This whole thing is completely unfair, Tyler began without preamble. You've always helped us. You've never complained before. And now suddenly you're acting like we've been taking advantage of you. Rebecca looked at her youngest son with newfound clarity. At 23, with his carefully disheveled hair and expensive sneakers, he still had the air of a teenager expecting the world to accommodate his desires. She had helped create that expectation. It wasn't sudden, Tyler, she said calmly. I've been considering this change for nearly a year, ever since you asked me to co-sign for an apartment you couldn't afford, then missed payments that affected my credit score. Tyler had the grace to look slightly abashed at that reminder. That was one mistake. One in a pattern, Rebecca corrected. And yes, I've always helped you and your siblings. That's what parents do. But there's a difference between helping and enabling. I've been doing too much of the latter. So you're just cutting us off? After everything we've been through as a family? Rebecca noticed how quickly he pivoted to emotional leverage, a tactic that had worked well in the past. Not today. I'm not cutting you off, she explained patiently. I'm establishing healthy boundaries. There's a significant difference. But the loan repayments, you know none of us can afford those right now. The payment plans are structured based on 8% of your current income, Rebecca said. Michelle and I calculated them carefully. They're entirely manageable if you adjust your spending habits. Tyler's expression darkened. So you've been investigating our finances? I asked for recent pay stubs before creating the repayment plans, Rebecca confirmed. All 3 of you provided them when you needed my help with various financial situations. I simply used that information to create realistic expectations. This isn't fair, Tyler repeated, falling back on his earlier argument. What kind of mother does this to her own kids? Rebecca felt a flicker of hurt at his words but maintained her composure. The kind who wants her children to develop self-sufficiency and financial responsibility. The kind who believes they're capable of more than they've been demonstrating. She glanced at her watch. My 15 minutes are up, Tyler. I have a supplier call in 3 minutes. If you'd like to continue this conversation, we can schedule time this weekend. Seriously? Tyler stared at her in disbelief. You're just going to kick me out mid-conversation because of work? I'm honoring my professional commitments, Rebecca clarified. Something I've taught all of you to do since you were old enough to understand the concept of responsibility. My business requires my attention during business hours. Tyler stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile floor. This isn't over, Mom. I didn't expect it to be, Rebecca replied calmly. Change is rarely simple or immediate. But it is necessary. After Tyler left, slamming the door with unnecessary force, Rebecca took a moment to center herself before joining her supplier call. The confrontation had been unpleasant but not unexpected. She had prepared for resistance, for emotional manipulation, for attempts to make her feel guilty for prioritizing herself after decades of putting her children first. What she hadn't fully anticipated was how liberating it would feel to finally speak her truth without softening it to protect their feelings. As the afternoon progressed, Rebecca received a series of increasingly strategic texts from Jessica, who had apparently been designated the family negotiator. Mom, we understand you're feeling unappreciated. How about we plan a proper celebration? To make up for last night? Then, we're willing to discuss a reasonable timeline for removing our stored items, but the loan repayments seem punitive. And finally, Dad always handled the family finances. Maybe we should discuss this with him before making any drastic changes. That last attempt at triangulation made Rebecca laugh out loud. Jessica knew perfectly well that her father had been out of the picture for years, providing the minimum child support required by law until the children turned 18, then disappearing into his new life with his second family. Bringing him into this situation would achieve nothing except perhaps revealing to him the extent of Rebecca's business success, information she had carefully kept private during their last child support renegotiation. Rebecca replied only once, I'm not negotiating the terms. I'm informing you of a decision already made. The documents are legally binding. The timeline is generous. My expectations are reasonable. By evening, Rebecca had received calls from all three children, each adopting a different approach. Aiden attempted logical arguments, Jessica tried emotional appeals, and Tyler vacillated between threats and promises to change. Rebecca maintained her position with each of them, polite but unwavering. After the last call ended, she poured herself a glass of wine and stepped out onto her back deck, gazing at the garden she had planted the previous spring. The perennials were just beginning to emerge, tentative green shoots pushing through the soil toward sunlight. Growth required the right conditions, she reflected. Too much protection, and plants grew weak and spindly. They needed to face some resistance, wind, rain, occasional cold, to develop strength and resilience. Her phone chimed with an incoming email from Michelle. Rebecca, Aiden called my office today requesting a consultation about the loan repayment terms. I explained that I represent you in this matter and suggested he consult his own attorney if he has concerns. Just keeping you in the loop. Michelle, Rebecca smiled slightly. Aiden was testing the boundaries, looking for weaknesses in her resolve. She had expected this and had warned Michelle it might happen. Her attorney was prepared. She replied, thanks for the update. Please document all contact attempts from any of my children. I anticipate more testing in the coming days. As the sun set over her backyard, Rebecca reflected on the day's events. The initial confrontation had been difficult, but necessary. Like lancing a wound to allow healing to begin, she had finally addressed the unhealthy dynamics that had been festering for years. The pain was inevitable, but temporary. What would follow, if she maintained her boundaries and her children eventually adjusted their expectations, would be healthier relationships built on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. Her phone rang again, displaying Jessica's number. Rebecca considered letting it go to voicemail but decided to answer. Growth required honest communication, even when it was uncomfortable. Hello, Jessica. Mom, Jessica's voice sounded different, less controlled, more vulnerable. I've been thinking about everything you said. About enabling and boundaries and respect. Rebecca remained silent, waiting for whatever would come next. I'm angry, Jessica continued. I'm angry and hurt and honestly, a little embarrassed. But I also. Her voice caught. I also understand why you're doing this. At least partly. I appreciate your willingness to consider my perspective, Rebecca said carefully. That dinner, Jessica said softly. Your birthday dinner. You paid for it without argument. You opened those terrible gifts like they were treasures. You've been doing that for years, haven't you? Accepting less than you deserved because we never thought to offer more. Rebecca felt a lump form in her throat. Of all her children, Jessica had always been the most emotionally intuitive. Yes, she acknowledged. For a long time. I'm not saying I agree with everything you're doing. Jessica clarified quickly. The loan repayments still feel extreme. But I understand why you felt you needed to do something dramatic to get our attention. It's not just about getting your attention, Rebecca explained. It's about creating necessary change. For all of us. I know, Jessica sighed. I just wish you'd talked to us first. Would you have listened? Rebecca asked gently. Really listened, without dismissing my concerns or promising temporary changes? Jessica's silence was answer enough. This isn't easy for me either, Rebecca continued. I never wanted our relationship to reach this point. But we can't build something healthier without first acknowledging what's broken. After they hung up, Rebecca felt cautiously optimistic. Jessica's response suggested at least one of her children might be capable of the self-reflection necessary for genuine change. It was a start. The next morning brought a new development. Rebecca arrived at her home office after her daily workout to find an email from Aiden with the subject line, Proposed Alternative Agreement. Attached was a carefully crafted document outlining a counterproposal, reduced monthly payments, extended timeline for removing stored items, and a request to revise the inheritance conditions. Rebecca appreciated the effort behind the proposal. It showed Aiden was taking the situation seriously rather than simply rejecting her terms outright. However, the content revealed he still didn't fully grasp the purpose of her actions. He was treating this like a business negotiation where compromise was expected, rather than a fundamental reset of family dynamics that required complete change. She replied with a brief but clear message, Aiden, I've reviewed your proposal. While I appreciate the thought behind it, my terms remain unchanged. This isn't a negotiation. The purpose isn't to extract maximum repayment or inconvenience you and your siblings. The purpose is to establish clear boundaries and expectations going forward. The financial terms are reasonable. The timeline is generous. The inheritance conditions are fair. What's needed now isn't a counteroffer, but a change in perspective. Mom, Rebecca spent the rest of the morning in back-to-back video meetings with her product team, discussing the upcoming fall collection. Around noon, she received a text from Tyler that surprised her. I talked to Jessica last night. She made some good points. Can I come by after work to talk? Just talk, no arguments. Promise. Rebecca replied, 7 p.m. works for me. Dinner will be your responsibility if you want to eat. Tyler's response came with unexpected humor, fair enough. I'll bring takeout. Not expecting you to pay this time. This small acknowledgement, that expecting her to pay for her own birthday dinner had been inappropriate, gave Rebecca hope that perhaps her youngest might be more capable of growth than she'd given him credit for. At 7 p.m. sharp, Tyler arrived with bags of Thai food from Rebecca's favorite restaurant. It was a small gesture, but meaningful. He had remembered her preference without being reminded. They ate in the kitchen, the conversation initially revolving around neutral topics: Tyler's work at a local marketing firm, Rebecca's upcoming business trip to a manufacturer in North Carolina, a new movie they both wanted to see. It felt almost normal, reminiscent of the relationship they'd had before money and expectations had complicated everything. After dinner, as they cleared the containers, Tyler finally addressed the elephant in the room. Jessica helped me see some things differently, he began, carefully folding a napkin rather than making eye contact. She pointed out patterns I hadn't really thought about before. Rebecca waited, giving him space to continue at his own pace. Like how I always come to you when I'm in trouble, but rarely just to check in or see how you're doing. Or how I talk about my career goals but never ask about your business. He glanced up briefly. She mentioned that you were in Entrepreneur magazine. I didn't even know that. 3 months ago, Rebecca confirmed. A feature on midlife entrepreneurs. Tyler nodded, absorbing this information. That's impressive, Mom. Really impressive. And I should have known about it. Yes, Rebecca agreed simply. You should have. I'm not good at this, Tyler admitted, gesturing vaguely between them. The emotional stuff. Admitting when I'm wrong. Dad was the same way. Your father never learned to grow beyond that limitation, Rebecca observed. But you still can. Tyler was quiet for a moment, then asked the question Rebecca had been waiting for, so this business of yours, it's really doing that well? Over $1 million in revenue? Almost $1. For $1 million last year, Rebecca corrected. Projected to hit $2 million this year with our new product lines. Tyler let out a low whistle. And here I've been thinking you needed my help with social media marketing. Rebecca laughed, a genuine sound that eased some of the tension between them. Your expertise might actually be valuable to my company, Tyler. But as a professional consultant, not as a son doing his mother a favor. Meaning you'd pay me? Tyler looked surprised. For professional services rendered, absolutely, Rebecca confirmed. But it would be a business relationship with clear expectations and deliverables. No family discount, no special treatment. Tyler considered this, running a hand through his hair. That actually sounds kind of great. To be taken seriously. Professionally, I mean. It's what I've been trying to tell all of you, Rebecca said gently. I respect your capabilities. I believe in your potential. What I no longer believe in is enabling dependence in the name of helping. Tyler nodded. Slowly. The moving truck. That was clever, by the way. Making us pay for dinner, so you pay for our moving trucks. Poetic justice seemed appropriate, Rebecca acknowledged with a small smile. Jessica and Aiden won't admit it, but they were impressed too. Annoyed as hell, but impressed. Tyler hesitated, then added, You've been underestimated for a long time, haven't you? Not just by us, but by Dad too. Yes, Rebecca said simply. I have been. I'm sorry for my part in that, Tyler said, the words coming out awkwardly but sincerely. And for the birthday dinner thing. That was really crappy of us. Yes, Rebecca agreed again. It was. Tyler laughed unexpectedly. You're not making this easy, are you? Growth rarely comes from easy conversations, Rebecca pointed out. But I appreciate the apology. It's a start. As Tyler prepared to leave, he paused at the door. The loan repayments and the storage deadlines, those are still happening, aren't they? Even after this talk? Yes, Rebecca confirmed. Accountability is important. Words need to be backed by actions. Tyler nodded, looking more mature than he had just days earlier. That's fair. Tough, but fair. I'll start moving my gaming equipment this weekend. After he left, Rebecca felt a cautious optimism. One relatively productive conversation didn't erase years of entitlement, but it suggested potential for growth. Real change would require consistency and time, but for the first time, she could envision a path forward. The following day brought an unexpected development. While reviewing her business analytics, Rebecca received a text from Aiden containing only a link. She clicked it, finding herself on a real estate listing for a small storage unit complex on the outskirts of town. The price was reasonable, the location convenient, and the potential return on investment solid. Before she could formulate a response, another text arrived, thinking of investing. Would provide solution for our storage needs plus potential income stream. Thoughts? Rebecca felt a surge of pride at this pragmatic approach. Instead of continuing to fight her boundaries, Aiden was seeking solutions that could turn the situation to his advantage. It was exactly the kind of resourcefulness she had hoped her actions might eventually inspire. She replied, Interesting opportunity. Happy to review business plan if you develop one. This type of thinking is exactly what I was hoping for. Aiden's response came quickly, working on projections now. Might need all three of us to invest together to make numbers work. Could be first step toward financial independence you mentioned. Rebecca smiled at this unexpected turn. Her children were collaborating on a solution rather than individually fighting her boundaries. It was a promising sign. As she prepared for bed that night, Rebecca reflected on the rapid developments of the past few days. The boundaries she had established had created immediate discomfort but also sparked potential growth. By refusing to continue enabling dependency, she had created space for her children to discover their own capabilities. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Emotional manipulation attempts might resume once the initial shock wore off. Old patterns wouldn't disappear overnight. But for the first time in years, Rebecca felt hope that her relationship with her adult children might evolve into something healthier and more balanced. She had paid for her own birthday dinner, an experience that had crystallized years of being taken for granted. But by paying for those moving trucks, a gesture both practical and symbolic, she had initiated a different kind of movement. Not just the physical relocation of stored possessions, but the beginning of her children's journey toward genuine adulthood and her own journey toward reclaiming her life. The path forward wouldn't be smooth or straight. There would be setbacks and resistance. But Rebecca Thompson was no longer willing to sacrifice her own well-being for the sake of enabling dependencies that ultimately harmed everyone involved. As she drifted toward sleep, Rebecca felt at peace with her decisions. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. She was ready. The next morning, Rebecca woke to an email from Jessica with the subject line, Thinking of You. The body contained only a link to an article titled, Setting Boundaries with Adult Children, a Guide for Parents. It was a small gesture, but it suggested Jessica was making an effort to understand Rebecca's perspective rather than simply fighting against it. Perhaps, Rebecca thought as she began her morning routine, the seemingly harsh lesson of the birthday dinner and moving trucks would ultimately lead to relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. Only time would tell, but for the first time in years, she felt genuinely hopeful about what that future might hold. Rebecca opened her planner and wrote a note to herself on June 1st, the deadline she had set for her children to remove their possessions, celebrate Independence Day, theirs and mine. Then she turned her attention to the workday ahead, secure in the knowledge that while building healthy family relationships would take time and effort, she had finally taken the necessary first step. The painful moment of paying for her own birthday dinner had become the catalyst for change that would ultimately benefit everyone involved. Sometimes, Rebecca reflected, the most valuable gifts come disguised as disappointments. And sometimes, the most loving thing a parent can do is to stop making life too easy for their children. With that thought in mind, Rebecca began her day, ready to face whatever challenges it might bring with the same clarity and resolve that had finally allowed her to transform her family dynamics from enabling to empowering. The week following, Rebecca's confrontation with her children unfolded in ways she hadn't fully anticipated. She had expected continued resistance, perhaps even escalation of their attempts to make her feel guilty or unreasonable. Instead, she found herself witnessing the first tentative steps toward genuine change. On Monday morning, she arrived at her home office to find an email from Aidan containing a detailed business plan for the storage facility investment. It was thorough and well-researched, showing consideration for market demand, operational costs, and potential return on investment. Rebecca reviewed it carefully, impressed by the level of thought he had put into the proposal. It wasn't perfect, his projections were slightly optimistic, and he had underestimated maintenance costs, but it showed initiative and problem-solving skills she hadn't seen him exercise in years. She replied with constructive feedback and specific suggestions for improving the plan, treating him as she would a business colleague rather than a son seeking approval. His response came within hours, thanking her for the insights and asking intelligent follow-up questions. There was no mention of the loan repayments or the storage deadlines, just focused engagement on a potential business opportunity. On Tuesday, Jessica stopped by unexpectedly during her lunch break. She brought salads from an upscale deli and a slightly awkward determination to have a real conversation. "I've been doing some thinking," Jessica said as they sat at Rebecca's kitchen table. "And some reading, actually." She pulled out a book titled Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents from her designer handbag. "I bought this thinking it might help me understand why you're suddenly acting so differently, but it's actually made me question some things about myself instead." Rebecca maintained a neutral expression, waiting for Jessica to continue. "The book talks about how some adult children never fully individuate from their parents, they stay in these patterns of emotional or financial dependence well into adulthood." Jessica picked at her salad, avoiding eye contact. "It describes how parents can enable this by trying to solve all their children's problems instead of letting them develop resilience. It's made me wonder if that's what's been happening with us." "That's a remarkably insightful observation," Rebecca said, carefully, not wanting to derail this moment of self-reflection with too much enthusiasm. "I'm not saying I agree with everything you're doing," Jessica added quickly. "The loan repayments still feel like a lot all at once. But I'm trying to understand your perspective better." "I appreciate that," Rebecca replied. "Understanding doesn't have to mean agreement. It's a start." Jessica seemed to relax slightly at this validation. "I called Dad yesterday," she admitted. "Thought maybe he could talk some sense into you." Rebecca raised an eyebrow but remained silent. "He laughed," Jessica continued, a hint of surprise still evident in her voice. "Said it was about time you stopped letting us walk all over you. Then he asked if I'd paid back the money I borrowed from him last Christmas, which I haven't, and it got uncomfortable." Rebecca suppressed a smile. Jessica's father had many faults, but he had always been direct about financial matters. It seemed he recognized the pattern Rebecca was trying to break, even if he hadn't addressed it in his own relationship with their children. "Anyway," Jessica continued, "I've made an appointment with a financial advisor next week. I need to get a better handle on my spending and saving if I'm going to manage these repayments." "That's a responsible step," Rebecca observed, feeling a surge of pride at this evidence of maturity. "I'm happy to review your budget if you'd like another perspective." Jessica looked surprised at the offer. "You'd do that? Even after everything?" "Jessica, my goal isn't to punish you," Rebecca explained gently. "It's to help you develop financial independence and responsibility. I'm still your mother. I still want to help, just in ways that promote growth rather than dependency." As Jessica prepared to return to work, she hesitated at the door. "Mom, there's something I've been wondering. How long have you been planning this? The confrontation, the legal documents, everything? The specific plan?" "About 6 months," Rebecca admitted. "But I've been considering making changes for much longer. Your father and I divorced 11 years ago, Jessica. You were 14. I spent your teenage years trying to compensate for his absence by saying yes to everything, never wanting you to feel deprived. Somewhere along the way, that pattern became our normal, even after you all became adults. Jessica nodded slowly, absorbing this perspective. And the birthday dinner? Was that the last straw or something? Rebecca considered the question carefully. It was a confirmation of what I already knew needed to change. Being expected to pay for my own birthday celebration after everything I've done for all of you, it crystallized the imbalance in our relationship. I'm sorry about that, Jessica said quietly. We should have done better. Yes, Rebecca agreed simply. You should have. But now we have an opportunity to build something healthier moving forward. After Jessica left, Rebecca returned to her work with renewed focus. The conversation had been encouraging, but she remained cautiously optimistic. Words needed to be followed by consistent actions before she would fully trust that lasting change was occurring. Wednesday brought a series of text messages from Tyler, updating her on his progress finding alternative storage for his gaming equipment. He had located a small climate-controlled unit near his apartment complex and was planning to move his items that weekend. His messages were straightforward and practical, without the emotional manipulation tactics he had initially employed. Rebecca responded with simple acknowledgement and an offer to help him sort through items if he wanted to reduce what needed to be stored. His reply surprised her. Actually, I've been thinking about selling some of the older systems. Could use the cash and honestly don't play them anymore. This willingness to part with possessions he had previously insisted were essential suggested a shift in perspective that Rebecca found promising. She had observed over the years that physical clutter often reflected emotional or psychological clutter, an inability to let go, to prioritize, to distinguish between wants and needs. Tyler's readiness to sell unused gaming systems might indicate growth in other areas as well. Thursday morning, Rebecca received an unexpected call from Michelle. Rebecca, I wanted to give you a heads up. Aiden came to my office yesterday to discuss the loan repayment terms. Rebecca felt a flicker of concern. Was he trying to find a loophole? Actually, no, Michelle sounded mildly surprised herself. He wanted to discuss restructuring the payments to align with his commission schedule. He's in sales, as you know, and his income fluctuates monthly. He proposed higher payments in his strong months and lower ones when commissions are down, but with the same total repayment over the 5 years. That's actually quite reasonable, Rebecca admitted, pleased by this evidence of Aiden taking responsibility rather than seeking to escape it. I thought so too, Michelle agreed. I told him I'd discuss it with you, but that it seemed like a practical solution. He also mentioned this storage facility investment he's considering with his siblings. Asked if I could review the legal structure for a potential partnership between them. I said I'd be happy to, at my standard rate. Rebecca smiled at this. Aiden was seeking professional advice and expecting to pay for it, another sign of growing maturity. Please tell him I'm open to the restructured payment schedule as long as the total and timeline remain the same. And I think it's excellent that he's consulting you about the partnership structure. Will do, Michelle replied. You know, Rebecca, when you first told me about your plan, I was concerned it might permanently damage your relationship with your children. But it seems like they're responding to the challenge better than either of us expected. It's early days, Rebecca cautioned. But yes, there are promising signs. I think perhaps they needed to see that I was serious, that this wasn't just another empty threat they could ignore until it went away. After ending the call, Rebecca spent some time reflecting on the unexpected developments of the past week. Her children's initial shock and resistance appeared to be evolving into something more productive. There was still a long way to go, but the early indicators suggested they possessed more resilience and adaptability than their years of dependency had led her to believe. That evening, Rebecca attended a networking event for local business owners. She had been attending these gatherings monthly for the past 2 years, building valuable connections and establishing herself as a respected entrepreneur in the community. As she mingled with fellow business owners, discussing supply chain challenges and marketing strategies, she found herself feeling fully present in a way that had often eluded her in the past. Previously, these events had been frequently interrupted by text messages from her children, minor emergencies that somehow always coincided with her rare nights out, requests for immediate financial assistance, complaints about problems they expected her to solve. Tonight, her phone remained silent in her purse. She was able to fully engage in conversations, exchange ideas, and even schedule a coffee meeting with a potential business partner without the constant undercurrent of anxiety about what crisis might be unfolding at home. It was liberating. For the first time in years, Rebecca felt her identity as a successful business owner, as a woman with her own interests and ambitions, taking precedence over her identity as a mother perpetually on call to rescue her adult children from the consequences of their choices. When she arrived home later that evening, she found an email from a prestigious business publication requesting an interview about her company's innovative approach to sustainable manufacturing. The journalist had heard Rebecca speak at a conference 3 months earlier and was interested in featuring her in an upcoming issue focused on eco-conscious entrepreneurs. Rebecca responded enthusiastically, scheduling the interview for the following week. As she prepared for bed, she realized that this opportunity might never have materialized if she had remained trapped in the cycle of enabling her children's dependency. The mental and emotional energy she had reclaimed by establishing boundaries was allowing her to pursue professional opportunities that would have been impossible to manage while constantly attending to her children's needs. Friday morning brought another surprise. Rebecca opened her front door to collect the mail and found a small package on her doorstep. Inside was a birthday card signed by all 3 of her children, and a gift certificate to her favorite spa for a full day of treatments. A note from Jessica explained, "We know we messed up your birthday. This doesn't fix everything, but we wanted you to know we're sorry." No strings attached. Rebecca felt a complex mixture of emotions as she read the note. The gesture was thoughtful and the acknowledgement of their failure to properly celebrate her birthday was significant. Yet she also recognized that gifts had often been their way of temporarily smoothing over deeper issues without addressing the underlying problems. Was this a genuine step toward change, or simply an attempt to mollify her in hopes she would soften her stance on the loan repayments and storage deadlines? She decided to accept the gift in the spirit it was offered, as a small step toward healing, while maintaining her boundaries regarding the larger issues at stake. She sent a group text thanking them for the thoughtful gesture and expressing appreciation for their acknowledgement. The weekend arrived with a flurry of activity. Tyler appeared early Saturday morning with 2 friends and a rented truck, ready to move his gaming equipment from Rebecca's basement. She offered coffee and breakfast, which they accepted gratefully, creating a brief window of surprisingly comfortable conversation before they began the work of dismantling and packing the elaborate setup. Rebecca observed from a distance, giving Tyler space to manage the process himself while remaining available if needed. She noticed that he had methodically organized his equipment, labeling cables and taking photographs of connections to make reassembly easier. This level of planning and organization was new. Previously, Tyler had approached most tasks with a haphazard energy that often resulted in complications that others, usually Rebecca, would need to resolve. "I'm impressed with how systematically you're approaching this," she commented as Tyler carefully wrapped a monitor in protective padding. He looked up, surprised by the compliment. "Yeah, well, I realized I needed to be more organized if I'm going to set everything up again properly in the storage unit. Plus, I decided to sell about 1/3 of this stuff. The older systems I don't really use anymore. Already listed them online and have some interested buyers." "That's excellent," Rebecca replied, genuinely pleased by this evidence of practical thinking. "Let me know if you need help with the sales or shipping." Tyler paused in his work, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "You know, it's weird. I've been hanging on to all this stuff for years, insisting I needed it, but now that I'm forced to deal with it, I'm realizing a lot of it was just, I don't know, taking up space without adding value to my life." Rebecca nodded, recognizing the deeper significance of his observation. Sometimes constraints force us to evaluate what's truly important. When space and resources seem unlimited, it's easy to accumulate without consideration. When we face limitations, we have to make thoughtful choices. "I guess that applies to more than just gaming equipment, huh?" Tyler said, a hint of self-awareness in his voice that Rebecca hadn't heard before. "It applies to most aspects of life," she agreed. "Resources, time, energy, they're all finite. Learning to allocate them wisely is part of mature decision-making." Tyler returned to his packing, but Rebecca could see that her words had registered. These small moments of insight, scattered among the practical tasks of implementing her boundaries, gave her hope that her children were beginning to understand the deeper purpose behind her actions. By Sunday evening, significant progress had been made. Tyler had completely cleared his equipment from the basement. Aiden had removed about half of his exercise equipment from the garage, with plans to finish the following weekend. Even Jessica had spent several hours sorting through her stored clothing, donating 3 large bags to a local charity and organizing the rest for transfer to a storage unit she had rented with a friend. The physical transformation of Rebecca's space mirrored the gradual shift in family dynamics. Areas of her home that had been colonized by her adult children's possessions were being reclaimed, creating room for her own priorities and projects. Similarly, emotional and mental space previously occupied by her children's constant needs was gradually opening up, allowing her to focus on her own goals and well-being. Monday morning, exactly 1 week after the confrontation that had reset Their family dynamics. Rebecca received an unexpected group text from her 3 children. "Mom, we've been talking a lot over the past week. We're still working through our feelings about everything, but we want you to know we're committed to making these changes work. We've rented a storage unit together, more economical than 3 separate ones, and should have everything moved by your deadline. We're also taking your financial boundaries seriously." Jessica had her first meeting with a financial advisor. Aiden is restructuring his budget around the repayment plan, and Tyler has already made his first payment from selling some of his gaming equipment. "We know this doesn't fix everything overnight, but we wanted you to know we're trying. Would you be open to a family dinner this weekend? Our treat, for real this time." Rebecca read the message several times, analyzing it for signs of manipulation or attempts to renegotiate her terms. Finding none, she replied, "I appreciate your efforts and commitment to change. A family dinner sounds lovely, just to enjoy each other's company, not to relitigate settled matters. Let me know when and where, and I'll be there." As she set her phone aside and turned her attention to her work, Rebecca felt the first real sense of peace she had experienced in years. The path forward wouldn't be perfectly smooth, old habits rarely disappeared without occasional relapses, and family dynamics were complex and deeply rooted. But the initial steps had been more positive than she had dared to hope. By establishing clear boundaries and refusing to continue enabling patterns that harmed both her and her children, Rebecca had created space for genuine growth. The painful moment of paying for her own birthday dinner had become a catalyst for necessary change that might ultimately lead to healthier, more balanced relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. Later that week, as Rebecca met with the contractor to discuss converting her basement into a rental apartment, she found herself reflecting on the broader implications of her actions. By refusing to continue enabling her adult children, she wasn't just changing their relationship with her, she was potentially changing the trajectory of their lives. Financial independence wasn't just about money, it was about developing the confidence, resilience, and problem-solving skills needed to navigate life's challenges. By insisting her children learn to manage their own finances and responsibilities, Rebecca was helping them develop capabilities that would serve them throughout their lives. The contractor showed her renderings of how the basement could be transformed into an attractive, income-generating apartment. The space that had housed Tyler's gaming equipment would soon provide affordable housing for a graduate student or young professional, while also creating additional income to fund Rebecca's eventual retirement. "This looks excellent," Rebecca told the contractor, approving the plans. "When can you start?" "We could begin next week if the permits come through," he replied. "Should be finished within 8 weeks, weather permitting." As Rebecca signed the contract, she felt a sense of purpose that went beyond the practical benefits of the renovation. She was reclaiming her space, her resources, and her autonomy, not selfishly, but in service of creating a sustainable life that would allow her to thrive without depleting herself for others. That evening, Rebecca received a surprising email from Aiden. "Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation regarding the storage facility investment. Your feedback was invaluable, and I've revised the business plan accordingly. I also wanted to share something I've realized this week. I've spent years focusing on quick returns and immediate gratification, while you've been quietly building something substantial and sustainable. I never really saw or appreciated that before. I'd like to learn more about how you grew your business, if you're willing to share that knowledge. Not to copy or compete, but to understand the principles that made you successful. Let me know if you'd be open to discussing this sometime." Rebecca read the email twice, touched by this unexpected request. For years, her children had shown minimal interest in her business beyond occasionally asking how the little online shop was doing. Aiden's recognition of her success and desire to learn from her experience represented a significant shift in how he perceived her, not just as a mother whose resources could be tapped, but as a successful entrepreneur whose knowledge was valuable. She replied immediately, "I'd be happy to discuss business principles with you. Why don't we schedule a proper meeting? You can come to my office hours, Tuesday and Thursday, October 12th, prepare specific questions, and we'll approach it as a professional mentoring session. I think you'll find that many of the principles that built my business, consistency, delayed gratification, strategic thinking, and ethical practices, apply to most successful ventures." The response from Aiden came quickly. "Thursday at 10. Works for me. I'll come prepared with questions. Thank you for being willing to share your expertise." As Friday approached, bringing with it the promised family dinner, Rebecca found herself in a reflective mood. The simple act of insisting her children pay for their own storage and repay their loans had catalyzed more positive change in 1 week than years of gentle conversations and subtle hints had accomplished. By refusing to continue participating In unhealthy patterns, she had created an opportunity for growth that benefited everyone involved. The moving trucks, practical resources she had provided to facilitate her children's transition to greater responsibility, had become powerful symbols of the broader shift occurring in their relationship. She was helping them move not just their physical possessions but their mindsets from dependency to self-reliance. Rebecca opened her calendar and created a new entry for 6 months in the future, Evaluation Day. On that day, she would assess whether the changes she was currently observing represented genuine growth or merely temporary adaptations designed to appease her until things could return to the comfortable patterns of the past. For now, though, she would celebrate the positive steps while maintaining the boundaries that had made them possible. The birthday dinner debacle that had sparked this transformation had been painful in the moment, but it had ultimately created an opening for authentic change. Sometimes, Rebecca reflected, the most valuable gifts came disguised as disappointments. And sometimes, the most loving thing a parent could do was to stop making life too easy for their children. With that thought in mind, Rebecca closed her laptop and prepared for the weekend ahead. Whatever happened at the family dinner, she would approach it with clear eyes and firm boundaries, recognizing that true love sometimes required the courage to allow others to face the consequences of their choices. By paying for their moving trucks while insisting they take responsibility for their lives, she had found a balance between support and enablement that offered her children something far more valuable than financial assistance: the opportunity to discover their own capability and resilience. The journey had just begun, but the initial signs were promising. Rebecca Winters had paid for her own birthday dinner, an experience that had crystallized years of being taken for granted. But by paying for those moving trucks, a gesture both practical and symbolic, she had set in motion a transformation that might ultimately lead to the best gift of all: adult children who stood on their own feet and a mother who could finally pursue her own dreams without guilt or constant interruption. It was, Rebecca decided as she reviewed the week's developments, money well spent indeed. 6 weeks had passed since Rebecca's confrontation with her children, and the promised deadline of June 1st had arrived. Standing in her garage that once housed Aiden's elaborate home gym equipment, Rebecca felt a profound sense of accomplishment as she surveyed the now empty space. The contractor would begin converting it into her new office the following week, creating a proper headquarters for her growing business that had outgrown the spare bedroom she'd been using. The transformation of her physical space mirrored the evolution in her family dynamics. What had begun as a painful moment, being handed the check for her own birthday dinner, had catalyzed changes that rippled far beyond her initial expectations. The boundaries she had established with such determination had created opportunities for growth that benefited not just her, but her children as well. Rebecca moved through her home, taking inventory of the changes. The basement that once housed Tyler's gaming equipment was now halfway through its renovation into a rental apartment. The guest room closets previously filled with Jessica's seasonal wardrobes now contained only actual guest supplies and a few of Rebecca's own cherished possessions she'd never had space to properly display. Her phone chimed with a notification. A calendar reminder: family dinner, 7 p.m., Giorgio's Italian. This would be their third family dinner since the confrontation, but the first one falling on the official deadline date. Rebecca had deliberately scheduled it this way, creating a natural opportunity to acknowledge the milestone they had reached together. As Rebecca prepared for the evening, selecting a stylish dress she'd purchased to celebrate landing a major new client, she reflected on the remarkable journey of the past 6 weeks. Each of her children had responded to her boundaries in ways that revealed aspects of their character she had either never seen or had forgotten existed beneath years of enabled dependency. Aiden, the eldest and most practically minded, had approached the challenge like a business problem to be solved. After their professional mentoring session, he had begun applying the business principles she shared to his own finances and career. He had not only restructured his budget to accommodate the loan repayments but had also negotiated a better commission structure at work after realizing he had been undervaluing his contributions. The storage facility investment was moving forward, with all 3 siblings contributing to the down payment. They had secured financing, formed a proper legal partnership with Michelle's guidance, and were scheduled to close on the property the following month. It was a modest beginning, but it represented something significant: her children collaborating on a constructive project rather than simply splitting the cost of a gift for her or a vacation for themselves. Jessica, always the most emotionally intuitive of the 3, had delved into understanding the psychological aspects of their family dynamics. Her initial reading had expanded into regular sessions with a therapist specializing in family systems. She had begun examining how being the only daughter in a household headed by a single mother had shaped her relationship with money, success, and independence. 3 weeks earlier, Jessica had asked Rebecca to coffee and shared a revelation that had emerged during therapy. "I've been trying to simultaneously compete with you and depend on you my entire adult life," she had admitted. "I wanted to have the trappings of success, the clothes, the car, the lifestyle, without doing the work to earn them honestly. It's why I've been in debt for years despite making a good salary." That conversation had marked a turning point in their relationship. For the first time, Jessica had spoken to Rebecca not as a daughter seeking approval or resources, but as one adult woman to another, capable of self-reflection and growth. Tyler, the youngest and historically the most resistant to responsibility, had perhaps shown the most surprising transformation. After selling much of his unused gaming equipment, he had discovered a talent for buying, refurbishing, and reselling vintage video game systems. What had begun as a necessity to fund his loan repayments had evolved into a promising side business that played to his existing interests and skills. 2 weeks ago, he had approached Rebecca with a business proposal, not asking for money, but seeking her expertise on scaling his operation and managing inventory. They had spent a productive afternoon discussing online marketplaces, shipping logistics, and customer service strategies. Rebecca had been impressed by his attention to detail and willingness to learn from her experience rather than expecting her to solve his problems. As Rebecca applied the finishing touches to her makeup, she acknowledged that the past 6 weeks hadn't been without challenges. There had been moments of backsliding, a text from Jessica asking for just a small loan to cover an unexpected car repair, politely declined with a suggestion that this was what emergency funds were for, an attempt by Tyler to delay moving some of his items, met with firm adherence to the deadline, and an initially tense conversation with Aiden about the inheritance conditions, resolved through clear communication about her reasoning. But these moments had been addressed with the new framework Rebecca had established: consistent boundaries, clear expectations, and a refusal to enable dependencies that ultimately harmed everyone involved. Each time she maintained her position, it reinforced the new reality: her love and support would continue, but the form they took had permanently changed. Rebecca arrived at Giorgio's Italian restaurant precisely at 7 p.m., pleased to discover all 3 of her children already seated at a corner table. This punctuality represented another small but significant change. Previously, family gatherings had typically begun with at least one child arriving late, offering minimal apologies while disrupting everyone else's evening. "Mom," Jessica rose to greet her with a warm hug. "You look amazing. Is that dress new?" "It is," Rebecca confirmed, taking her seat. "A small celebration for landing the Westridge account last week." "The Sustainable Home Goods Company?" Aiden asked, surprising Rebecca with his knowledge of her business. "That's a significant client. Congratulations." "Thank you," Rebecca replied, genuinely touched by his awareness and acknowledgement of her professional achievement. "Their initial order is substantial, and there's potential for ongoing collaboration if the line performs well." "We ordered a bottle of Prosecco to celebrate," Tyler explained, gesturing to the ice bucket beside their table. "Not just your business success, but also," he glanced at his siblings with a hint of pride, "we've officially completed the storage move-out before today's deadline." "Every last dumbbell and yoga mat," Aiden confirmed with a rueful smile. "Though I'll admit, it was more work than I anticipated. I had no idea how much equipment I'd accumulated over the years." "The same with my clothes," Jessica added. 3 separate clothing donations and 6 consignment shop visits later, I've finally pared down to what actually fits in my apartment closets. It's been strangely liberating." Rebecca felt a surge of pride as she listened to them describe the practical steps they'd taken to honor the boundaries she had established. These weren't just empty promises or temporary appeasements, they were concrete actions that demonstrated commitment to change. The waiter appeared to pour the Prosecco, and once everyone had a glass, Aiden raised his in a toast. "To deadlines met and lessons learned," he said with unexpected sincerity. "And to you, Mom, for caring enough to be tough when it was needed." They clinked glasses, and Rebecca took a moment to appreciate the significance of this acknowledgement. 6 weeks earlier, Aiden had viewed her boundaries as punishment or betrayal. Now he recognized them as expressions of a deeper, more mature form of love, one that prioritized growth over comfort. As they settled into dinner, the conversation flowed naturally between personal updates and discussions of the storage facility investment. Rebecca noticed that her children were sharing the conversational space more equitably than in the past, each listening attentively when others spoke rather than simply waiting for their turn to dominate the discussion. "We've been talking about the inheritance conditions," Jessica said carefully as their main courses arrived. "Not to challenge them," she added quickly, seeing Rebecca's expression, "but to understand them better, and to make sure we're on the right track to meet them." Rebecca set down her fork, giving the conversation her full attention. "I'm open to discussing them. What specifically would you like to understand better?" The condition about demonstrated financial independence, Aiden specified. We want to make sure we have the same definition in mind. It's not just about income, Rebecca explained. It's about responsible management of resources. Maintaining an emergency fund. Staying out of high-interest consumer debt. Living within your means. Building toward your own retirement rather than counting on an inheritance to solve future problems. And the partnership requirement? Tyler asked. That we need to maintain a functional business relationship with each other for at least 5 years? That's about demonstrating the ability to collaborate constructively, Rebecca confirmed. To work through disagreements with maturity. To honor commitments even when they become challenging. These are skills that will serve you well regardless of what you ultimately inherit. Jessica nodded thoughtfully. It's not about the money itself, is it? It's about becoming the kind of people who would manage an inheritance responsibly. Exactly, Rebecca felt a profound satisfaction at Jessica's insight. An inheritance can be either a blessing or a curse, depending on the character and capabilities of the person receiving it. I want it to be a blessing for all of you, which means helping you develop the qualities that would make that possible. We've actually been discussing something related to that, Aiden said, exchanging glances with his siblings. The storage facility is a start, but we're thinking about expanding our investment partnership. Tyler's vintage gaming business is showing promise, and we're exploring how Jessica's marketing expertise and my sales background could help scale it. Rebecca listened with interest as they outlined their emerging plan, a family business venture that built on each of their strengths while addressing Tyler's need for structural support in growing his initially solo operation. It was exactly the kind of collaborative problem-solving she had hoped her boundaries might eventually inspire. That sounds promising, she said when they had finished explaining. I'd be happy to offer feedback on your business plan when it's developed, if you'd find that helpful. We were hoping you might, Jessica admitted. Not to fund it, she clarified quickly. But to lend your expertise. We've all realized we have a lot to learn from how you built your business. The conversation continued through dessert and coffee, touching on everything from Rebecca's upcoming business trip to New York to Tyler's recent date with a financial analyst who had actually made budgeting sound interesting. Throughout the evening, Rebecca observed subtle but significant shifts in how her children engaged with her and with each other, more authentic, more respectful, more adult. As the waiter approached with the check, Rebecca reached for her purse out of long-established habit. 3 hands immediately shot out to intercept the leather folder. Mom, put your wallet away, Aiden said firmly. We meant it when we said this was our treat. We've already taken care of it, Jessica added with a smile. Including the tip. Consider it a small token of appreciation, Tyler explained. For the moving trucks, yes, but more importantly, for believing we could do better even when we weren't showing any evidence of that capability. Rebecca felt unexpected emotion rise in her throat as she absorbed the significance of this moment. The dinner check, once a symbol of their taking her for granted, had become a symbol of newfound respect and appreciation. Thank you, she said simply, knowing they would understand the depth of meaning behind those 2 words. As they walked to their cars afterward, Jessica hung back slightly to speak with Rebecca privately. I've been meaning to ask you something, she said, her expression serious. That night, at the birthday dinner when we stuck you with the check, you seemed surprised and hurt, but you were already planning the confrontation, weren't you? You already had the legal documents prepared. Rebecca considered how to answer. Truthfully, without diminishing the impact of that pivotal moment. The documents were ready, she acknowledged. But I was still hoping I wouldn't need to use them. I was giving you all one last opportunity to show that you understood the importance of reciprocity in our relationship. And we failed spectacularly, Jessica concluded with a rueful smile. You did, Rebecca confirmed without rancor. But that failure created an opening for something better to develop. Sometimes we need to see ourselves clearly before we can make meaningful changes. Jessica nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking a lot about that night. About how none of us even considered that it was inappropriate to expect you to pay for your own birthday dinner. About what that revealed about how we viewed you, as a resource rather than a person with your own needs and feelings. And now? Rebecca prompted gently. Now I'm seeing you as a whole person for perhaps the first time, Jessica admitted. Not just as my mother, but as a successful businesswoman, as someone with wisdom I can learn from, as a woman who rebuilt her life after divorce and created something meaningful. I'm sorry it took this shakeup for me to really see you. Rebecca felt the weight of these words, their honesty, their vulnerability, their promise of a different kind of relationship moving forward. Thank you for that, she said softly. It means more than you know. Enabling behavior disguised as helping is one of the most common pitfalls in family relationships, Rebecca continued. When we solve problems for capable adults that they should be solving themselves, we communicate a devastating message. I don't believe you can handle this. Over time, they begin to believe it too. The audience nodded in recognition, many taking notes or snapping photos of her slides. Rebecca had discovered an unexpected talent for translating her personal experience into practical guidance that resonated with others facing similar challenges. After the workshop, as attendees lined up to ask questions or share their own stories, Jessica approached with a tablet in hand. "Mom, I wanted to show you something before I head back to work," she said, opening a financial tracking app. "I've hit my 6-month emergency fund goal. 3 months ahead of schedule." Rebecca felt a surge of pride as she reviewed the figures. "This is excellent, Jessica. How did you manage to accelerate your savings? Remember that marketing consultation I did for Tyler's vintage gaming business? He insisted on paying me properly for my expertise instead of expecting family freebies. And I negotiated a performance bonus at work based on the metrics we discussed in our last budget review." Jessica's expression conveyed both pride in her accomplishment and gratitude for Rebecca's guidance. "It feels different earning my security rather than just having it handed to me." "That's exactly the point," Rebecca agreed. "Earned achievement builds confidence in a way that handouts never can." As Jessica departed, Rebecca gathered her presentation materials, reflecting on how much had changed in the months since that pivotal birthday dinner. The basement renovation had been completed on schedule, creating a comfortable apartment that now housed a graduate student who paid market-rate rent that contributed significantly to Rebecca's retirement savings. The garage had been transformed into a sleek office space that properly showcased her business to visiting clients and partners. More importantly, her relationship with her children had evolved in ways she had hardly dared hope for during those initial tense confrontations. The loan repayments were proceeding according to schedule, with occasional requests for flexibility during particularly challenging months but no attempts to escape the responsibility entirely. The storage facility investment had closed successfully, providing her children with valuable experience in property management and business partnership. Tyler's vintage gaming business had grown steadily, expanding from a side hustle into a legitimate small business with its own website, inventory management system, and growing customer base. He still lived in his apartment, but his increased income had allowed him to move from barely making rent to consistently saving for his future while repaying his debt to Rebecca. Aiden had perhaps surprised her the most. After their professional mentoring sessions, he had begun applying the business principles she shared to his own career with remarkable results. 6 weeks ago, he had been offered a significant promotion at work, one that came with both increased responsibility and substantially higher compensation. Instead of immediately upgrading his lifestyle, he had consulted with Rebecca about balancing loan repayments, increased retirement contributions, and quality of life improvements. As Rebecca drove home from the workshop, she received a group text from her children: "Annual budget meeting and dinner next Tuesday? We've been reviewing our partnership financials and would value your input. Our treat, of course." Rebecca smiled at the message. The annual budget meeting had been their idea, a structured opportunity to review their financial progress, discuss challenges, and plan for the coming year. What had begun as a painful confrontation had evolved into a collaborative process of growth and mutual support. When she arrived home, Rebecca found an unexpected package on her doorstep. Inside was a custom-designed plaque reading, "Rebecca Winters, entrepreneur and boundary coach extraordinaire," along with a note in Jessica's handwriting, "For your new office. From your proudly independent adult children." The gesture brought tears to Rebecca's eyes, not just for the acknowledgement of her business success, but for the phrase, "proudly independent." 6 months ago, her children had viewed independence as a punishment rather than an achievement. Now they recognized it as something to celebrate. That evening, as Rebecca enjoyed the peaceful solitude of her reclaimed home, she reflected on the profound truth she had discovered through this journey. Sometimes the most loving gift a parent could give their adult children was the gift of consequences. By refusing to shield them from the natural outcomes of their choices, she had created space for growth that would have been impossible if she had continued enabling their dependency. The initial confrontation had been painful for everyone involved. The transition had been challenging and, at times, emotionally turbulent. But the results had transformed not just her family dynamics but her children's fundamental understanding of themselves and their capabilities. Rebecca opened her laptop to review the numbers for her upcoming quarterly tax payment. Her business had grown by 37% in the past 6 months, growth that would have been difficult to manage if she had still been constantly responding to her children's emergencies and financial crises. The boundaries she had established had created space not just for their development but for her own continued success. As she worked, her phone chimed with an email notification from Aiden. The subject line read, "Mom's Boundary Revolution, a case study in tough love." The message explained that he had written an article for a business leadership blog about the lessons he had learned from Rebecca's approach to resetting their family dynamics. He was seeking her permission to publish it, with names changed to protect privacy. Rebecca opened the attached document and began reading. Aiden's analysis was insightful and surprisingly vulnerable, acknowledging how entitled he had become. And how Rebecca's firm boundaries had ultimately benefited him far more than her continued enabling would have. The article concluded, "What initially felt like rejection was actually the most profound expression of faith I've ever experienced. By refusing to continue solving problems I was capable of solving myself, my mother communicated an unshakable belief in my potential. 6 months later, I'm more financially secure, professionally successful, and emotionally mature than I would have been if she had continued making my life easier in the short term at the cost of my long-term development." Sometimes the most valuable gift is the one that feels most difficult to receive, the gift of being held accountable for your own life. Rebecca closed the document with a profound sense of validation. The painful moment of paying for her own birthday dinner, a small humiliation that had crystallized years of being taken for granted, had become the catalyst for transformative change. By refusing to continue enabling dependency and by providing practical resources, those strategic moving trucks, that facilitated rather than prevented natural consequences, she had set in motion a journey that had benefited everyone involved. She replied to Aiden's email with her blessing to publish the article, adding, "I'm profoundly proud of the growth you've demonstrated. The capacity for self-reflection you show in this piece is exactly the quality I hoped might develop when I established those boundaries 6 months ago. You have my full permission to share these lessons with others who might benefit from them." As Rebecca prepared for bed that night, she found herself contemplating the remarkable journey from that birthday dinner to the present moment. What had begun as a necessary confrontation had evolved into a new family paradigm based on mutual respect, appropriate boundaries, and a shared commitment to growth. Her children were developing into the capable, responsible adults she had always believed they could be, and her own life had expanded in ways that would have been impossible if she had remained trapped in cycles of enabling and resentment. The moving trucks she had arranged and paid for, a practical necessity that had also served as a powerful metaphor, had facilitated not just the physical relocation of her children's possessions but a profound shift in their understanding of themselves and their relationship with her. By paying for those trucks while insisting her children take responsibility for their own lives, Rebecca had found the perfect balance between support and accountability. Rebecca's last thought before drifting off to sleep was a realization that she hoped to share in her next workshop. The most valuable gift we can give those we love is not protection from discomfort but faith in their ability to navigate life's challenges with resilience and wisdom. Sometimes that gift comes wrapped in difficult boundaries and painful confrontations. But the growth it makes possible is worth every moment of discomfort along the way. The birthday dinner had cost Rebecca $67.43. The moving trucks had cost $325 each. But the transformation they had catalyzed? That was absolutely priceless. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.